front sight of, looking towards the future, Marshall-Rutty seems like a guy at a position that doesn't have a lot of depth for Canada that could play a real role on this team going forward. He'll probably get throwaway minutes during this window. But to pull a bit of Alex on my end, I looked at FBref and Opta stats. He is in the top 82 percentile or 82nd percentile of MLS fullbacks with progressive carries per 90 minutes, with 2.5 per 90 minutes. And he also averages 1.19 tackles per 90 in the defensive third. He's among better MLS fullbacks in his 18 matches with Charlotte. And I think part of the perception of him coming into the Canadian men's national team as well is that people don't necessarily watch Charlotte FC games. Like, they're not among the teams that I watch the most of in MLS. And I watch more MLS than is probably a healthy amount for most people.
It's a very good way of saying it. We should also make that t-shirt for you. I think that'd be a good brand. Yeah. What's interesting about Marshall-Rutty is I think Toronto FC fans knew him really well, but outside of the sicko space, I don't think people really paid much attention to him. And you saw these headlines about trialing with these clubs, and European clubs are interested in him. But beyond that, I don't think a lot of people really saw him. Then he went to Montreal, and he didn't necessarily get the opportunities we expected in a team that was, not really in an upheaval last season, but obviously to be shipped out again. I don't think it's a coincidence that he's now again linked with English clubs because he plays for Dean Smith. I think that's definitely something to watch in the very near future. But in terms of bringing him into this team now, I mean, he's someone who has that experience. He's someone who ticks a box and fills a need for right now. So it seems really smart. And you're rewarding players for playing well. And it's, both this week, Jesse Marsh and Mauricio Pochettino kind of had this speech about MLS in slightly different ways about how, it's not a slight on players anymore. And the differentiation between guys playing in Europe and guys playing in MLS has much more to do with calendar and fitness than competition. Now, whether that's entirely true or whether that's just something that sounds nice right now, I do think that the gap has certainly closed. And when you look at some of those players in MLS who are contributing at really high levels continually, and when they're healthy, Jonathan Osorio and Richie Laryea are, it does seem like Jahkeele Marshall-Rutty, given opportunities now in Charlotte, is someone that can do that if he doesn't get a move before then. So it'd be nice to have him back in the mix, and that's someone we all expected would very much be in the mix for 26.
What's interesting with Jahkeele Marshall-Rutty is we always knew about his ceiling. We heard great things about it. There's a reason you don't, get signed to a 15-year-old homegrown contract and make your debut as young as you did. And, he still made 80 appearances with TFC, even at his age, without a ceiling. But the problem is, there was no idea of where his floor was, and he just didn't fit anywhere in the Toronto FC team because it was the classic conundrum. He was just too young, didn't really fit at the winger position. Then they kind of had a lot of expensive options in front of him, so he wasn't even going to get a chance to develop and find that. But then when you tried to play him at fullback, he just wasn't defensively good enough, and didn't fit as a fullback either. So it's classic. Okay, not good enough for a wing, or not a good enough attacking wise for a winger, not good enough defensively for a fullback. You're kind of no man's land. Funnily enough, last year, we might have actually seen him get closest to his ceiling so far with Montreal. They decided the genius move to play him as a wingback. Laurent Courtois really did well with that one. Marshall-Rutty actually had fun. I was surprised to see it, but that's why it's always interesting to look at the numbers. His numbers last year with Montreal offensively blow out anything he's done this year with Charlotte in terms of final product, everything. I think that's the advantage of him playing as a wingback versus a fullback. But what I like at Charlotte, he was obviously one of probably the biggest casualties of Courtois leaving, Donadel going back to a more of a back four. At Charlotte, he's found his floor. He's found his floor as a very, his defensive game has grown leaps and bounds, been, throughout the defensive tackle stats. Even just you watch him play, there's more discipline there in terms of where he needs to be as a left back, right back for Charlotte. I think that's huge because now that he's starting to figure out his floor, it's earned him this Canada call up. It's earned him European interest again. There's been a lot of links in recent weeks from top 5 league like Burnley, Villarreal, Wolfsburg are some of them. Now, if he can find a way to keep that floor that he's found at Charlotte and then, pick things a bit more offensively to what he was doing last year with Montreal, he's going to be a real problem. And then you remember, he's only 21. And at the end of the day, this isn't his natural position. He's still learning. It makes you realize how important this Charlotte move has been for him because it's allowed him to develop maybe a bit quieter, because I think that was maybe the issue with the Toronto, is that when you come in at such a young age, or there's pressure already, TFC doesn't handle their homegrowns the greatest. It can be tough. And it was actually really interesting. I think earlier this year, Neil Davidson had an interview with Jason Hernandez, and he said, we have a huge regret with Jahkeele Marshall-Rutty. The only reason they traded him wasn't because they didn't want him, it was because he was in the last year of the contract and he was going to leave anyway. So really 21 is, is so young that he's got so much time to keep growing. And I think that's what Marsh sees. So this is exciting because, he's still 4 or 5 years away potentially from hitting his best, but he can still contribute in the here and now. And the fact that he can cover left back and right back with all the injuries makes it a big bonus.
A few minutes ago, Ben referred to Jesse Marsh as still a relatively young coach. You guys are still relatively young podcasters, and Jahkeele Marshall-Rutty has been a professional athlete for 8 years. Like that is insane. There's a tremendous clip.
And he's 4 years younger than I am.
Yeah, I know. There's a great clip of some of the TFC guys had gone to a Raptors game, and Marshall-Rutty's there. I think Osorio, maybe Richie, and I'm pretty sure it's Gary Trent Jr. And whether it was RJ Barrett at the time or someone else who knew that Gary would have a reaction. And he says, ask him how old he is. And he goes, I'm 20. And he goes, ask him how long he's been playing. And Gary's like, what's going on here? How long have you been playing? He goes, this is my 6th season. And he goes, that's not real. He goes, oh yeah. He's like, what? You're a child. What do you mean you're 6-year pro? How is that even possible? The reaction was incredible. Yeah.
I mean, there's also an aspect of those type of players that they're so young that we think of them as old.
Yeah.
And like Jahkeele Marshall-Rutty, he's out of the national team picture. No, he's 21. He's very much in this national team picture.
He's the 4th youngest guy in the squad. Like, he's just to add again, like, it's even within this Canadian team, other than DeFougerol and Knight Labelle, who are super young. Yeah. I think him, Hibbert, and someone else are all the same birth year. I think just one's younger and Marshall-Rutty's in the middle. Like, he's still super young, even among the guys Jesse Marsh has called in.
Wow.
There were a few omissions on this roster as well. You mentioned Jonathan Osorio there, of course, one of the long-time call-ups. Like, you would pencil him in on every single roster. He's not on this team. And the comments from Jesse Marsh about Jonathan Osorio were saying that he's still, within this picture. I don't think this is the last we've seen of Jonathan Osorio in a Canadian kit. Very similar comments to what he said about Semo Piet last year as well. Totally forgot about that quote from Jesse Marsh. That's an interesting one, because is this it for Jonathan Osorio in a Canadian kit? And of course, Daniel Jeppesen also left off this Canadian roster, Brendan.
No, I don't think it's it for him. We joke about Marshall-Rutty's age and could this be the end of him? I think in midfield, unless you are an Atiba, unless you are elite, and to use your percentile reference in the top, 97 and up percentile, I don't think that there are too many guys in a lot of programs that have the overturn that Canada is now getting towards, that have players, into their 30s. So for those midfielders in particular, that clock is ticking. Age kind of starts probably at 28, if not even at 27. Both of those guys are well past that now. I do think that Jonathan Osorio still brings a lot, and I don't necessarily think that they have a like-for-like replacement for what he brings, in addition to the leadership that Jesse Marsh clearly reveres, and that at the moment this team really needs. So, I had my doubts earlier this year about whether Osorio would be a big piece going into 26, and I still don't think he'll be a big piece. It's very much possible he'll still be a piece. I think he deserves it. I think he'll earn it, but he has to work for it, and some things have to fall his way. And at the moment, Jesse Marsh is given an opportunity to rest. It's been a difficult year. It's been a emotionally toiling year for someone like that as well, who's gone through so much upheaval at his club level, and is always the face of it. I think that's something that we take for granted a lot. Someone in his position, homegrown and as a captain, and as one of the few confident speakers, if you will, like in that room, like he's always the mouthpiece. And we do take this for granted in hockey and other sports where like that's just expected. It's normalized in Major League Soccer, but it's not really normal in soccer to have to be the front-facing voice consistently the way he is like that. So I think that also weighs on a person as well, and adds to the miles. And he's got a lot of miles right now, but I do think he's still got some left in the tank.
Yeah, I mean, we're not done seeing Jonathan Osorio with Canada. I like Jonathan Osorio, what he brings, his profile. I think really what's going against him, and it was the same thing that went against Samuel Piet, is, Jonathan Osorio's kind of hit what he is as a player for a few years now, with like, he'll give you a good 5 to 10 goals a year, depending on the role he is. He's going to bring you leadership, etc. The problem is, like, we can say he's a very good to very good MLS player. The reality is that over the last few years, someone like Nathan Saliba, he became a very good MLS player. And when you're in Jesse Marsh's position and you're looking at 2026 and beyond, when you got 2 very good MLS players and one's 31 and one's 21, it's kind of natural that you kind of prioritize the development of the 21-year-old, because he's very good now and he can still even become great if he can. And now that he's gone to Europe, he's already tasted European football with those qualifiers they played. He's playing in the Belgian league. That's prior, that's development. Ditto goes for Nico Seeger. All these guys that are popping up, and I think that's kind of working against Osorio. Or then even a guy like Mathieu Choinière, who he compares very nicely to, and they're probably very similar in level. Well, Choinière just fits the system better. So I think for Osorio, it's just a combination of his age, his fit too, because there's not a natural fit as long as they're playing a 2-man midfield for him in the team. He's always going to be a bit more of a guy that you get 20, 30 out of at the end of a game, unless they switch to a 4-2-3-1. A starting role for him is kind of lost, because I know Marsh tried playing him out wide against Mexico in the Nations League. Didn't really work. I don't think that's something we're going to see again. So it's just one of those where it's a number game. It's not a bad thing, because Junior Hoylett finds himself in the same position, and now he's back in this camp, and Samuel Piet finds himself in a similar position. He hasn't come in just because of all the depth in the midfield. But honestly, will he make the World Cup squad? I can't tell you, because if it's 23, it's going to be very tough for him too, because there's just so much depth. But who knows? Maybe if there's 26, injuries happen, he's a guy you'd be very happy to see in there. So it's something that I think what's nice with Osorio, his attitude is going to be good about it. And I think we'll definitely see him in a camp before the World Cup. And, hopefully he can just, continue to push, because at the end of the day, that competition isn't a bad thing. And the reality is, if you're sitting in a world where Osorio is not at the World Cup, while it sucks for Osorio personally and sucks for the program, it's also a good thing, because that means you had however many players better than him that you're leaving a guy like him at home. That's the reality of World Cups. Good teams leave good players at home all the time.